Now, the next area I'd like to look at is physical contact. And that's an area that lots of trainees do feel worried about, particularly if they've got advice from colleagues of don't engage with physical contact unless it's absolutely necessary. It makes people nervous. But actually the law is very reassuring about this. And in 2012, Michael Gove, who was then the Secretary of State for Education, sent a letter round to all schools to reassure them about the position on this legally. And he said in his letter, "It is not illegal to touch a pupil. There are occasions when physical contact with a pupil is both proper and necessary." Now, the reason he felt the need to send this letter out was because thousands of schools in the country, and there are 32,000 schools in the UK, but thousands of them have adopted policies of minimizing physical contact with pupils and students, even avoiding it. And even a large teacher union advised their members to avoid physical contact with pupils and students. Now, I think, and I thought at the time, that's a crazy thing to do because your job involves so much physical contact to do it properly. So this is what I want you to think about for the next little pause in reflection. Stop the video for a moment and just make a list of all the occasions when you're going to be in regular physical contact with your pupils and students as part of your job. It's a long list, so take your time and come back with at least 6 or 8 occasions when you're going to be in regular physical contact with your pupils and students. Now, when I do this session in universities and teacher training centres, it actually gets very interesting and animated discussion. Because the first thing that the primary school teachers will say is how often they are doing things like comforting children who get upset or who are bullied in the playground, or actually helping them with practical tasks. So in primary schools, teachers recognise that physical contact is a regular part of their job. Some secondary teachers are more reticent about it and think, well, it's not necessary, so I don't do it. But actually, I want you to rethink that if you can, because the law for primary school teachers is no different for the law for secondary school teachers. Indeed, it's no different. The law is no different for special needs teachers in special schools. Now, if you think about that, if you've ever spent any time at all in a special school, you will know that it is impossible not to come into regular physical contact with your pupils and students because they need so much help, don't they? And sometimes they'll need comfort and warmth, and they'll want a cuddle or some kind of comforting hug. Perfectly appropriate thing to do where you are responding to their need. So work in a special school for 5 minutes and you won't even think about this question. But let's go back to where you might come into regular contact with pupils and students. Well, doing your job, demonstrating things is an obvious one. And if you are a primary school teacher, you'll be demonstrating things like how to hold a pen, because children will grab pens and pencils in very awkward ways, and they need to be shown that. Their fingers need to be manipulated to hold it properly. Same with a paintbrush. Same with a knife and fork when young children are learning to eat at lunchtimes. All of those are done by manipulation. Also, when you're demonstrating other techniques in secondary school, you will very quickly realize that if you're a music teacher or a science teacher or dance and drama or a PE teacher, that you're going to be regularly demonstrating techniques, often by using physical contact. I mean, if you're a teacher teaching kids how to play rugby, how to safely form a scrum in rugby, that needs physical contact, doesn't it, to coach them to do that properly and safely. So let's take the example of PE as a demonstration. I mean, I used to love teaching PE, and I'd get my class of 7 or 8 year olds into the gym hall for the first time. And they all thought they were going to go on the apparatus. And I'd say, no, you're not going on the apparatus till you learn how to fall off the apparatus. So I'm going to teach you forward rolls. So I'd get them on the mats. And I'd say, right, I need a volunteer. And of course, what happens then? All the hands go up, you know, they all want to do it. Not all. Out of a class of 30, probably 24 or 25 will have their hands up. And there'll be 5 or 6 sitting there, you know, with their hands down, feeling a bit nervous. Don't pick those, obviously. Pick the ones who are confident enough, because you've suggested already that you're going to engage them in some physical contact. So I'd say, right, out you come. Now, I turn that implicit request for physical contact into an explicit request. So I'd say to them, right, I'm going to put you in 3 positions. I'm going to hold you in 3 positions. Is that all right? And they'd say, yeah, okay. Right, okay. Hands down, head down, and bend over, and because I want the other 29 to see the first position you're in. And of course, they're all, you know, wondering what's going to happen, and they're looking up at me with their arms, and I say no, and I push their head in between their arms and straighten their arms, and I say no, because I want all the other 29 to see the position. So I say, right, there's position 1. That's what I want you to take up in a minute. Now lean forward, and I'd hold the child then in a place where they're slightly out of balance, where all the weight is on their arms, because I want the 29 to see the weight on their arms, and the child is slightly out of balance and needs holding. So I'd say, right, that's position 2. And in position 3, you're going to put all the weight on your arms, keep your head tucked in, and roll over without your head touching the mat. Are you ready? 1, 2, no, don't touch the mat with your head, and I'd lift the head up, and I'd say, ready, 1, 2, 3, and I'd roll them over. What am I doing there? Well, I'm demonstrating, aren't I? Demonstration is a very, very important technique for a teacher. Use it as much as you can in whatever subject you're teaching, in whatever you're doing. If you can demonstrate things, do it, because it'll enhance your ability and your technique as a teacher, make you a much more effective teacher if you use demonstration techniques. And they're available to you in a whole range of subjects across ages and phases. You just think of how many times that you will be using demonstration techniques as a teacher. They are in their thousands, literally in their thousands. So don't be afraid of using demonstration. Another one that people will quickly recognize involves physical contact is first aid. And you may not be a first aid trained person, that doesn't matter. Remember this definition of duty of care: to behave as a responsible parent would. So if a child cuts themselves or hurts themselves, they need first aid. They need the wound clearing up and, you know, dressing on it and what have you. Now, in schools, there will always be first aid trained people. Even in a primary school, there'll be 4, 5, maybe even 6 people who are trained for first aid. But there's always going to be an occasion when they're not around, when you may have the kids out on a trip and you've got the green box. And if a child hurts themselves, you're the one who's responsible for applying first aid. Because if you don't, you're failing in your duty of care. I mean, if my child came home with a graze on her knee, and I said, how'd you get that? And she said, oh, I fell over. You know, well, why didn't you teach her clean it up? Oh, she said she wasn't first aid trained, so she couldn't do it. I'd be down to that school wanting to know why that teacher had failed in their duty of care towards my child. So don't put yourself in a position where people can say you've been negligent just because you're not first aid trained. That's irrelevant. If you want to get first aid trained, ask your head or the person responsible for CPD in the school. It's great. I've been first aid trained, and it gives you a lot of confidence. But it's not necessary to be trained in order to apply it. But it is something where you're going to come into physical contact with children in quite an intimate way sometimes. So be confident about that. Another one will be when children need comforting. Now, lots of primary teachers recognize that as a regular feature of children getting bullied or they get upset about things. And secondary teachers think, oh, that's not something I feel confident about. Well, as I say, don't think that it's inappropriate to comfort a distressed child. What would a parent do if they saw their teenage child distressed? They'd offer them some comfort, wouldn't they? So if that's what you do, if you offer them some comfort and they accept it, there's nothing inappropriate about that. But those of you who are men in the audience will be more worried about this than women, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But if you think it doesn't go on in secondary schools, you're quite wrong. And the evidence, if you want to see it for this, is on those programs that you may have seen a few years ago on Channel 4. Those programs about teaching in the East End, teaching in Yorkshire, educating Wales, educating Essex. They're all still on the Channel 4 archive. And if you watch them, they're absolutely littered with examples of secondary teachers comforting teenage boys and girls when they get distressed and upset about things. But don't intrude into people's personal space. Don't go and comfort them because that's what you think they need. Offer it. And if you've identified a need, offer that comfort. If they accept it, it might be appropriate to give them a hug, or they may kind of fall into your shoulder or want a pat or a hug of some sort. But I'm not telling you to go around hugging kids if you're not comfortable with it. If you're not comfortable with it, don't do it. I'm not forcing you to do it. I'm just telling you it's neither inappropriate nor illegal to do it, particularly if you're applying your duty of care towards children who are in need through their distress. Here's an example. Many years ago, a little girl in my class, 10 years old, was crying. And I said, "What's the matter, Mandy?" And she wouldn't tell me. She's doing her work, she's kind of covering up and writing, and she's whimpering away, and she's clearly tears streaming down her face. And I said, "What's the matter?" And she wouldn't tell me. So I left her for a few minutes. And I came back to her and I said, "Mandy, are you still crying? What's the matter?" And she, nothing, there's nothing the matter. I'm not, So I said to the other kids on the table, I said, "Have you upset Mandy? What's going on here?" And they said, "No, sir, we haven't. We've asked her, but she won't tell us either." So I left it. Playtime comes and the kids are going out. And I said, "Mandy, come here a minute, love. I want to speak to you, please." And she comes over and I said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "Tell me what's the matter. You're not going out to play till you tell me what's the matter." And she goes, "My mum's been diagnosed with cancer." And the kid collapses into my arms and cries her eyes out. Now ask yourself, what's the appropriate response of a teacher at that moment? Now to me, it is not to say to that child, "Oh, hang on a minute while I go and get a witness, because I can't touch you unless I've got a witness," or "Hang on a minute while I go and tell the head teacher, they'll deal with it." Or, responding in that way is not, to me, appropriate. It's not applying the duty of care that's required of you. What's appropriate at that moment is to show her some humanity, isn't it? And to comfort her at the point at which she needs it. And so I did give her a little cuddle, and I gave her some reassuring words I could at that moment. She had a good cry, and off she went out to play. So again, keep in mind, what would a responsible parent do when they see their child distressed? They'd comfort them. Another one that people get nervous about is congratulating children. Now, if you are not comfortable about touching them, I'm not telling you to do it, but you can leave it at saying to kids when they do something well, "Well done, excellent, very good," and leave it at that, a verbal affirmation. But actually what's also perfectly natural is that people congratulate each other by patting each other on the back, or giving each other a high five or a fist bump, or shaking their hands. That's a perfectly natural and appropriate form of congratulation and praise. We all need congratulation, praise, and affirmation. Teachers particularly need to model that, don't they, appropriately. So again, don't think there's anything inappropriate about it. Hi everybody, my name is Alan Newland, and I've been in education for over 40 years now, both as a teacher in a primary school, as a head teacher, as a lecturer in teacher education, as an advisor to the Department for Education, and at the General Teaching Council for England. So I've decided to put my sessions online. I think these professionally recorded and edited sessions provide an excellent solution to the teaching and learning challenges we face in the coming months. They provide an innovative way of providing content to students and trainees that you can deliver at your convenience in the time that you choose. And it engages students, I think, in a way that keeps them interested and maintains their concentration levels. So if you're interested in accessing these videos, do get in touch with me through the contact details that are on screen now. I'll be very happy to answer any queries or questions that you have, and I look forward to talking to you.